Good day, folks. I'm Astrid Lenore, and today we're going to look at this 100% vintage accurate Fender Thinline Broadcaster. Okay, for those of you that survived the opening salvo, this instrument has been one of my favorite mod projects over the years. Yes, it's official Fender. It started life as a Squier vintage modified Thinline Telly, modeled after a 68 to 69 style original Thinline in Shoreline Gold. The main difference spec-wise is the 9.5 inch radius, which is more or less on all modern Fenders. Oh, and it's arguably not a true Thinline as it's only hollow in the upper bout, so it has a bit of that good old-fashioned Telly heft. To address the elephant in the room, yes, I did in fact put a Jazzmaster trem and rocker bridge on it, as well as a heavier non-ashtray bridge plate, which I then cut down to fit. It was just one of several mods which I'll get into later. In my defense, my mods are not dissimilar in spirit to products Fender has already released in the Paranormal and Alternate Reality series. You all know the Telecaster. You name a guitarist, they've probably played one. It was the first solid-body Spanish-style electric mass-produced, and it stuck around for a reason. At its heart, the Telly is, well, primitive. It's a sort of proto-guitar that involves magnetic coils on two slabs of wood bolted together, but hey, there's no arguing results. But they weren't calling it the Telly back then. Back in 1950, radio was still pretty cool, so they went with the name Broadcaster for around a year before getting a cease and desist from Gretsch, who were using the name for a drum set. Fun fact, Fender now owns Gretsch, so they can legally use the Broadcaster name if they want to. But at this point, we've been calling them Telecasters for close to 3/4 of a century. Plus, Telecaster shortens nicely to Telly. Try that with a Broadcaster and...
Well, I have studied abroad. Or two.
Yeah. In any case, for a brief time, the instruments were released with the Broadcaster decal removed. These were the much sought-after No-Casters. Then later in 1951, Fender changed the name and some of the specs and decided to celebrate TV rather than radio, redubbing the model the Telecaster. There hasn't been much change in standard Telecaster design since then, at least in the broad strokes. See what I did there? But there was a substantial change between the Broadcaster and the Telecaster, identical as they may appear. The pickups on the Broadcaster were spec'd differently, delivering a slightly higher output as well as a rawer, less trebly tone that takes overdrive like a champ. The wiring was completely different. Position 1 gave you the bridge pickup by itself, Position 2 gave you the neck by itself, and Position 3 was the neck pickup run through a capacitor to give a darker, jazzier, lower output tone. And the tone knob? Well, it wasn't. Instead, this was a bleed knob which allowed players to mix in the neck pickup when the guitar was in position 1 and did nothing in the other two positions. Guess Leo Fender really liked that neck pickup because you could get it in all three switch positions. I mentioned Tellys have largely remained the same since 1951, and while this is largely true, I have not accounted for the slew of options that started cropping up in the late 60s through the 70s. The one relevant to our discussion today is the Thinline Telly, which was originally released with standard Telly pickups and wiring in 1968 to 1969. The most obvious changes were a pickguard redesign, and of course, the semi-hollow body with an F-hole. While the argument still rages about whether this affects the tone, I fall in camp yes, it definitely made the instrument significantly lighter, as well as bringing a fresh face to it. Which brings us to this instrument, which, as I said, started life as a Squier and has kind of mutated from there. After the success of my Jaguar experiment, I decided to bring many of the changes that had worked there into this guitar as well, including the tremolo. In particular, I wanted a series option which is most easily done by just swapping the switch. But why put in a 4-way when you can put in a 5-way? So I went looking for options for that spare switch position. For this oldest of Thinline designs, I turned to the oldest of Telly designs for inspiration. That's right, the Broadcaster. I got the idea for these Broadcaster style mods from Joe Gore at Tone Fiend. I've shouted him out on this channel before. He's awesome and you should go watch all his stuff after you've finished here. Joe, if you're watching, this abomination is all your fault. I decided that dark circuit sounded really fun, and since this guitar didn't have a rhythm circuit like the Jaguar for those darker tones, I decided to try out one of those. The Jaguaring already incorporated a modified blend knob, since I'm a tone wide open kind of girl, so needless to say I did the same wiring here. I say modified as this setup allows me to blend in either pickup when the other is on by itself, rather than just the neck with the bridge position. It sees a lot of use, especially with my out-of-phase setting, which is a push-pull on the blend knob. The one on the volume activates a Jaguar-style strangle switch for funsies. So long story short, this guitar is already sort of the intersection of Thinline Telly, Jaguar, and Broadcaster, and I love it that way. But I decided it would be fun to double down on the Broadcaster, and so after far too much online tone comparison, I picked up this Seymour Duncan vintage Broadcaster set to swap for the stock Duncan design pickups on the Thinline. A couple caveats here. One, I'm the last person to say Squiers are good guitars if you upgrade the pickups. Squier pickups are great, particularly the stock Duncan designed ones. For the record, they're the overseas equivalent to Seymour's vintage Telly line. I've enjoyed them for many years, and I'm convinced even many professional players could do worse than a good set of Squiers. 2. I'm not just throwing these stock pickups away. I have several projects planned for them that you'll just have to stick around to find out about. I decided in the case of this particular instrument, I wanted to try an experiment to fundamentally alter its character on some level, and pickup swaps are one classic way to do that. I'm not going to go into all the crazy wiring options, as that would take all day, but I will give you before and after clips on all 5 switch positions so you can compare the vintage style Telly pickups to the Broadcaster set. Bear in mind the price and possibly quality difference, as the old ones are made cheaply overseas and the new set is true US Duncan. There are more expensive options out there, but I wouldn't call these pickups cheap, listing at $178 for the set. Also bear in mind that, as usual, I'll be restringing after the mod, so you may hear a bit more brightness and sustain from that. With that, on to the sound demo. Enjoy! So, final thoughts. I was expecting a small tonal difference, but this is pretty major. Firstly, they are significantly hotter than the stock ones, to the point I didn't even realize my volume pedal wasn't fully up during the demo. The tones are much throatier and raunchier, and yet have a sort of balanced depth that lends itself well to fingerstyle. No big surprise there, given the jazz and country artists the instrument was originally marketed toward. Overall, very dynamic and very fun to play. I'm not sure how much difference the semi-hollow body makes, but I continue to like it for style and weight relief if nothing else, though I'm coming to appreciate the practicality of having a separate control plate, as you have to literally remove the neck on this guitar to get the pick guard off, as the one goes underneath the other. That aside, I love these pickups. They're bringing voicings I've never heard out of this guitar, or for that matter any other. The asymmetrical pickups caught on for a reason, though overall I'm wishing they stayed with the original spec. I know I didn't do much with exploring the Broadcaster wiring options, but trust me, they're fun. That's something else I may explore in a follow-up video if y'all are interested in it. That's it for today though, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, stay beautiful.